All right, so we have the 4th edition of Alcoholics Anonymous, and if we open our books up to the first page, it's that blank page which says Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the name of our book, and I have all kinds of great things noted on mine, but we'll turn to the title page. Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism, 4th edition. Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc., New York City, 2001. So the things that I have pointed out here is that the story of is in italics, and anything that's in italics is quite important in this book. And so this is the story of thousands of men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. So it's important to know that this is stories of people who have actually had this happen to them in their lives. And they're going to tell us how they've done that in this book. For me, what was pointed out to me was the word recovered. So we are not cured from alcoholism. We have recovered. And we're going to talk about that more. And the way it was described to me when I was taken through the book the first time was like getting the flu. So we recover when we get the flu, but we have to follow certain steps in order to not get the flu again. You know, we're going to wash our hands. We're going to wear a toque and gloves if we go out in the cold. We're going to take our vitamins. If it's snowing, we're going to wear snow boots. So we can follow certain steps in order to be recovered from the flu and not get it again. Just like if we get alcoholism, we can recover from it, but we need to maintain certain steps in order to not be suffering from it again. So let's open it up for discussion. Anyone would like to raise their hands to discuss the title page? Nobody? Dottie, do I see you looking for your button?
No, English is trying to share.
Okay, perfect. There we go. English, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name's English. I'm an alcoholic. So just on this page, the only other thing that was pointed out to me is that this is the first promise that's made because it tells us that we can recover.
I like that. Thank you. All right. And C.
Hi, I'm Ann. I'm an alcoholic. So there are two things. One is that it says that we have these men and women have recovered from alcoholism, and my sponsor pointed out to me that means that we've recovered from the hopeless, helpless state, but we never recover from the allergy. And the other thing is that this printing was in 2001, and I know there's some discussion now of working on a new edition, a 5th edition. I don't know when that will be coming out, but probably not for a few years. But there's talk about that. So that's it. Thanks.
Yes, and I heard that there is talk about a 5th edition, but what I was told was that there was 2 more translations that needed to be done before they would move on to a 5th edition. So I'm not sure if anybody else wanted to speak on that title page. I don't think you do, so we're going to, looks good, move on. So we're going to go to the table of contents, and now we had a little bit of edition issue, so some people didn't have the 4th edition. So we are going to go through the table of contents, and I'm going to point out the stories that relate to women to be highlighted. If you are not in the 4th edition, I just invite you to browse the stories for the ones which are about women, and we'll discuss why we're doing this when we get to the preface. So we're going to go to the second page of the table of contents, which is VI. And we're going to highlight number 9, the keys of the kingdom. Oh, and number 3, women suffer too. Thank you, Della. Sorry. All right. And then on the next page, VII, we are going to do number 2, fear of fear. We're going to highlight number 3, the housewife who drank at home. We're going to highlight number 5, my chance to live. We're going to highlight number 6, student of life. Number 7, crossing the river of denial. Number 8, because I'm an alcoholic. And then the next page, VIII, we are going to highlight number 12, winner takes all. Number 14, the perpetual quest. And then on the next page, which is IX, we're going to highlight number 4, listening to the wind. And then on the last page of the table of contents, which is just X, we are going to highlight 10, empty on the inside, 12, another chance, and 14, freedom from bondage. And just from the titles, they sound good, don't they? So we're going to explain a bit of that when we get to the second page of the preface on why we highlighted those stories. But as we said, they are the stories of the women, and we are all ladies, so maybe you can start to see a pattern there. All right, so if everyone's good, we're going to move on to the preface or preface, depending where you live and how you want to pronounce it, which is page XI. All right, looks like everybody's ready. This is the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. The first edition appeared in April 1939, and in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. The second edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The third edition, which came off the presses 1976, achieved a circulation of approximately 19,550,000 in all formats. Because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume, describing the AA recovery program, has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th editions. The section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact, just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor. The second printing of the first edition added the appendix Spiritual Experience. In the second edition, the appendices on the AA tradition, the medical view, and religious view of AA, the Lasker Award, and information on how to contact AA were added, and the appendix on the Alcoholic Foundation was discontinued. But the chief change was in the section of personal stories, which was expanded to reflect the fellowship's growth. So I'll stop there and we'll pause to do some conversation on this page. So for me, I personally have all of the years and the number of copies highlighted because it shows how quickly AA grew in those time spans in between the publications. We also want to note that there exists a very strong sentiment against changing any part of this book. And I personally have been at a quarterly where we've talked about some of those changes, and I can attest to that strong sentiment. The conversations are quite animated and people are quite passionate about not changing the first 164 pages of the book. It does say that the first portion of this volume is the AA recovery program because we want to remember the doctor's opinion, which comes before the first 164 pages. Let's open it up for discussion. Anyone else want to point out things? Thank you, Dottie.
I just wanted to point out that Dr. Silkworth is, is buried in Long Branch, New Jersey, here in the United States. And, it wasn't for quite a while before he was truly recognized for all his support within our program. And the other thing I have noted underlined is the second printing of the first edition added the appendix, the spiritual experience, which without that spiritual experience that Bill himself had, I don't know if we would be as far along as we are today. So that's all I have on that.
Thank you so much. Melissa? Melissa, you're unmuted. Oh, you were. Now you're not.
Better?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you a question. I was wondering what kinds of things the people who were animated about argued for and against in changes. And I also wanted to, I was thinking about, like, I'm a teacher, and I was thinking about my students. I'm 50, so I'm used to text being written as though you're talking to a man and you're supposed to just extrapolate. But I was thinking the little girls that I teach now would be like, oh, this is a man's book. It's not for me. And so I was wondering if that came up.
That is so funny you ask that, because the one thing that was debated the motion was to change the wording from men and women to be more inclusive, and it was denied. But I think people wanted to suggest people or persons to be more inclusive. I myself have never had a problem because I'm using the book to identify as alcoholic, not man or woman. So maybe explaining that could be a good course of action. Anyone else like to say anything else on this first page? And C, thank you.
Hi. The other thing my sponsor pointed out to me that it says, because this book has become the basic text, and to think about what a textbook is. And when she said that, it made me really think about, I hadn't realized this before, having not done the work before, that this is a textbook is a book that goes into depth on a particular subject matter, and it's meant to teach and to be used, for people to learn, gain information from, and that's what this book is for. It's really a textbook with step-by-step instructions, and it looks at a particular problem in depth and studies it. So I thought that was helpful.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. This isn't just a storybook. It's meant to teach us something. Excellent. So let's move on to the second page of the preface, page xiii. Bill's story, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, and one other personal history from the first edition were retained intact. 3 were edited, and one of these was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written with new titles. 30 completely new stories were added, and the story section was divided into 3 parts under the same headings that are used now. In the third edition, Part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 of the stories in Part 2, They Stopped in Time, were carried over from the second edition. 8 new stories were added. In Part 3, They Lost Nearly All, 8 stories were retained. 5 new ones were added. This fourth edition includes the 12 concepts of world service and revises the 3 sections of personal stories as follows. 1 new story has been added to Part 1. 2 that originally appeared in Part 3 have repositioned there. 6 stories have been deleted. 6 of the stories in Part 2 have been carried over. 11 new ones have been added and 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 new stories. 8 were removed, in addition to the 2 that were transferred to Part 1. All changes made over the years in the Big Book, AA members' fond nickname for this volume, have had the same purpose, to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately and thereby to reach more alcoholics. If you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. So the two things that I personally would like to discuss on this page is that it basically defines the changes that are made to the stories. And the reason they change the stories is to update with the times. So the 5th edition, which is, the next edition to come up, that'll represent our membership more accurately, where we have a lot more of cross addiction happening in our membership. And so you've seen it evolve as the years have gone by with the stories in the back. The second part that I have highlighted that I use very, very frequently with anyone that I'm working with that's new is the directions at the bottom of the page with regards to the stories. Some traditional big book thumpers don't like people reading the stories. They stick to the first 164 pages, but I find the stories to be very, very useful if you can't get a meeting or if you're not sure if you relate to an alcoholic. So there's very clear instructions on what you're to do when you read those stories. You're supposed to look for those 3 clues. Yes, this has happened to me. Yes, I felt like that. And yes, I believe this program can work for me too. So when I'm working with someone new for the first time, I always get them to read those ladies' stories and highlight when they find those similarities. It's similar to going to a meeting. You're listening to someone's experience, strength, and hope. So let's open up this page for discussion. If anybody has anything to add, comment, or question. Thank you, Dottie.
Yeah, Kim, a Dottie alcoholic. I just want to add to what you just said about that. That's why identification of to be an alcoholic is so important. Sometimes people come in and they're like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm this, I'm that. And that's where, my sponsor had me ask myself these questions and where I can identify. And she shared that identification of who you are is very important for you to understand what's going on in the process. So that's all I have on that. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Michelle C.
Yes, I was just wanted to ask that question. You said now the fifth edition of basically talk more about the strange alcoholic.
Well, the stories will include more stories of people who are duly addicted because that's the shift in our membership. Every time they rewrite the edition, the stories in the back change to include the membership of the day. So the shift that we've noticed is that people are duly addicted. It's very rare that you get a true alcoholic coming in. They're usually duly addicted. And I know up here in our area, we have people that come to us that struggle in other areas because our program is stronger and it's been translated to them.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else speak on this page? Leslie, thank you.
Hey there, my name is Leslie and I'm an alcoholic. 2 things is we do a big book at our group. And we made a conscious, group decision to include Bob's Nightmare. And I'm always surprised how many people that they've never heard it, right? And I think I added it because it was Bill and Bob, right? I mean, we heard Bill's story, and quite honestly, I know that people that I'll hear them say after the meeting, I've never even read that story. Like I didn't even know, right? How many people are really so happy that we read it, and I know that the program is the 164, but I think it's also important to include Bob. The other thing I wanted to say or comment on is, God bless if they're going to change the stories to cross addicted. I get it. That's where we are today. But you get those old timers in the rooms. I'm telling you, like, they're very adamant in saying, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to be here and do our program, great, because it's across the board. If you're, Overeaters Anonymous want to come over, great. But we don't want to hear about chocolate cake at 3:00. And we don't want to hear about, cocaine at, whenever, right? Because it's Alcoholics Anonymous. So do you have some kind of like, is it just a hope, or, because I just would be shocked. I'm okay with it, right? But I would be shocked if they did cross addicted into the Alcoholics Anonymous book. I think it would just curl people's hair unless they're all dead, the old timers.
Well, you do hear it in some of the stories that they're talking about sedatives. They're talking.
Well, yes,
they
so
do. Yeah, they do. So it's general, but our membership is much broader since 2001 to include people who are. And it won't say that they're cross addicted, but it's going to talk about it in their stories because it's part of their experience.
Well, that'd be cool. For a lot of people that are coming in that are, but God bless.
And just a side note, like, our basic text is used in other 12-step fellowships as written, not transferred. So CA, CMA, they both use the text as written. So we can just swap out that word and put anything in there. It translates. All right. So moving on to the foreword of the first edition. This is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. It is important that we remain anonymous because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Being mostly business or professional folk, we could not well carry our occupations in such an event. We would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation. When writing or speaking publicly about alcoholism, we urge each in our fellowship to omit his personal name, designating himself instead a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Very earnestly, we ask the press also to observe this request, for otherwise we shall be greatly handicapped. So lots on this page. We're going to open up and have a lengthy discussion for sure. But what I like to point out for myself is that this book is meant to show others precisely how we have recovered. So like we said in the preface, this is a text, a basic text. It's going to show us how we can do this process. I also like that it talks about anonymity in two ways. It talks about personal anonymity as well as the tradition of anonymity, which is at the level of press, radio, and film. For me, I am personally not anonymous. I have the ability to carry this message to a lot of people, where this book was written in 1939, and they only had the means of transmitting this person to person. This is an excellent example. Is I can deal with an overwhelming influx of people wanting what I have because I can create a Zoom call. So technology has enabled us to be able to spread this message easier, so I can handle an overwhelming number of personal appeals. So for me, I find my personal anonymity to be less important. But at the level of press, radio, and film, I understand that our traditions are very important. So I don't identify myself as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous on my Facebook page or when I'm speaking at events about recovery. I will reference a 12-step program if I am asked, but I present myself as a sober person who has recovered from alcoholism and addiction. So that's the way I treat anonymity, and I know other people have other views. So let's open it up on other people's points on this page, because I know there's lots. Dottie?
Hi, everybody. Dottie, alcoholic. So it was pointed out from me by my sponsor is, the way the word we is written in the beginning, because Alcoholics Anonymous is a we program, and we is mentioned 2 times in the first 3 words of the first step. And the word we is mentioned 1,300 times in our basic text, which is the first 164 pages. I was like, wow, like somebody actually sat there and counted them all. I was like really impressed. But I also have highlighted in my book that to show other alcoholics precisely how we recovered is the main purpose of this book. And part of that is in italics, and that's how we carry the message. And that's a really important part, that we carry the message to another alcoholic. And avocation, avocation is, the unpaid worker, and that's, and this is where like the traditions are started to be mentioned in this forward. Going forward, tradition 8 is for the avocation, the unpaid worker. And, just on this page, tradition 9 and 11 and 12 are mentioned in itself. So, going towards the end of the paragraph. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dottie. Melissa? We're tug-of-warring. You got to hit it on your end. There you go.
I was thinking about that anonymity, and I was wondering if anyone has ever read Russell Brand's book. He's an actor and a comedian, and obviously he is not at all anonymous. But there's another reason that I think anonymity is a bit of a good reason, and that's because he basically repackaged the 12 steps and sold them, right? So like when I bought his book, like I'm a fan of his, but he made a pile of money off of those 12 steps, and you never know what's going to happen over the arc of his life, right? And how well he's going to represent those steps, as history unfolds. So just another thought to consider.
Well, that's right. And that brings up another point. There is several celebrities that I've witnessed that have outed themselves as members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but you also have to remember you're representing the group. So if I am Kimberly Masters, Alcoholics Anonymous member, and then I relapse and I rob a bank and murder somebody, that's going to reflect on the whole of AA. A similar example can be made of postal workers. That one guy was a postal worker and he did something in his uniform, and now there's the term he went postal. So that kind of brings it into light of that anonymity being important, because we are representing the group as a whole. So if we do something bad, it reflects, and people would say, oh, that doesn't work. Look, she's drinking again. So, Raven.
Raven, alcoholic. I like how it says that this book isn't just for alcoholics, it's for everyone. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone better understand the alcoholic. So it would be a good book to give to my mother if she doesn't understand my alcoholic ways, or even just to give someone who doesn't think they're an alcoholic, to give them this book, and maybe they can read a story and relate, and it can give them an answer. But yeah, I like how it's like, I do feel like this program could help non-alcoholics. Like, you don't see like non-alcoholics doing a 4th step, but I'm sure they have things in their life that they could look at that would make them want to do a 4th step. So yeah, that's kind of my input on that.
Yeah, I agree. I've loosely translated the 12 steps for my children. You know, they both have alcoholic parents, and as we know, it's a family disease. So we practice these principles in parenting as well in our household, which is fun. But yeah, so, and that's the same going to the avocation. We're advocates for this program. So that doesn't just necessarily mean just for other alcoholics. It could be for those family members. Dottie, you have your hand back up again?
Yeah, if anybody's truly new to this process and hasn't gone through the book completely, it might help you to have a dictionary handy. Just because I remember the first time I went through, I was in the dictionary more times than I was in the big book because there were a lot of words that I just didn't understand, or I needed to have clarity on the words that the way they were being used was confusing me. So, I have a 12 and 12 dictionaries and a big book dictionary, but a regular Webster will work too if you have one handy. So just a little bit of a suggestion to those who are new and even those who aren't, that are confused by some things.
That's right. And, you know, put in the chat if you are confused by any words, because there's lots of us here that have been through this process multiple times and are happy to answer. We'll try to touch on all of those words as we go to decode the book. So if I have no more hands up on that, we'll switch to the last page of the foreword of the first edition. All right, no more conversation. Perfect. Okay, so we are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. There are no fees or dues whatsoever. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. We are not allied with any particular faith, sect, denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. We shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book, particularly from those who have commenced work with other alcoholics. We should like to be helpful to such cases. Inquiry by scientific, medical, and religious societies will be welcomed. Alcoholics Anonymous. So the things that I personally have highlighted on this page is that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. You know, that is the only thing I need, and I think that is probably my favorite tradition of them all. And that we just simply wish to be helpful to those that are afflicted. I never was helpful to anyone prior to coming into this program. I was helpful to myself. And now I find myself, you know, moved to tears because I have this passion to help other people to achieve what I've gotten from working this program. So anyone would like to speak on this last part or any of what we've read here? Dottie, thank you.
So, so there were four more traditions mentioned here. So, you know, if you're new again, you might not know what the traditions are. So there are no dues or fees whatsoever. I'm sure everybody knows that that's tradition 7. We are allied with, and we are, oh my goodness, are not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. That's tradition 10. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted, as Kimberly mentioned. That's tradition 5. And the most important thing about being honest is for whatever reason that was removed from tradition 3, but it pertains to 3. So, you know, honesty is our best policy in this program, and it keeps us sober. So that's all I have on that page. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dottie. Anyone else wish to speak on anything in the foreword of the first edition? All right, Anne, thank you.
Hi. So does anybody know, I just have a question. Does anybody know whether the traditions had already been written at this point? And this paragraph was taken from the traditions, or is this what one of the things that was used to formulate the traditions?
The traditions were actually written after the foreword was written. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll discuss that in the foreword to the second tradition, or second edition. It's on page xiii if you'd like to reference it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Nobody else? Last call. Ash, thank you.
Hi, Ashley Alcoholic. I guess I was just looking here what kind of stood out to me. I just hear a lot of opinions with people that don't really know AA, and they're like, oh, it's like a religious thing, or, you just hear all these opinions, but I just love here how it says, we are not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. And I just love that because, we are so inclusive, and basically the only aim is to be helpful. But then there's like a lot of opinions that, happen, and, someone might go up from the podium and start talking about their religion, right? And it's like that, we're not really supposed to do that, but it's like a person could go to one meeting and then have that opinion on, so yeah, like the answers are in the book, and I just really love that. It's like a higher power of our own understanding. So anyways, that's all. And you're great.
Thank you. I love you too. Yes, and someone wise mentioned a day or two ago about that the traditions aren't like rules or laws. They're suggestions on how to conform. Kelowna.
Yes, I just have a question. Can you, Kimberly, please explain the way you did before about why they took out the honest from the honest desire to stop drinking?
Oh, right. So we did have a discussion about that with, when we do our preamble or in our traditions, it does not say honest desire. And the number one reason is because we're all liars, and that would be exclusive, right? When we come into this program, we aren't the most honest folk. And so just simply having a desire to stop drinking is good enough for us, because that honesty word may turn people off because they're not honest, right? So that was removed. And it is just a desire to stop drinking is tradition 3. Anyone else? All righty.